Mr. Vice President, Madam Deputy High Commissioner, distinguished colleagues, thank you for the invitation to join today's panel. The challenge of speaking at the end is to not simply repeat the very critical points that have been made by the previous panelists, but I do think it's worth reiterating that informality is the norm, not the exception in the world of work. The informal economy is also diverse, so creating laws and policies that are suitable, accessible, and inclusive for these workers is complex. And it's this complexity that makes a human rights-based approach to informality so crucial. Building on what my distinguished panelists have said, I want to highlight how taking action to address informality is not only a moral and economic necessity, but also a requirement under international human rights law and a practical way to advance towards a human rights economy. In particular, I want to highlight 3 principles that can inform how policymakers understand and respond to the particular challenges of realizing the rights to work and to social security in the informal economy. The first principle is intersectionality. Informal work is not just the result of economic factors. It is intertwined with systemic discrimination and structural inequalities. As the Special Rapporteur highlighted, workers' identities shape how and where they work, leaving them vulnerable to exploitative working arrangements, poor working conditions, and a high risk of poverty. Women are overrepresented in the informal economy, typically confined to the lowest paying and most insecure jobs. Almost half of workers of informal workers are self-employed or own account workers. These workers are excluded from legal protections because labor laws distinguish between those who are in a standard employment relationship and those who aren't. For these workers, illness, care responsibilities, or disruptions in access to resources can result in a direct loss of income. And of course, these factors too have a gendered dimension. Despite facing higher risks of poverty, workers in the informal economy are typically excluded from contributory social insurance because they're linked to employment, these programs, and targeted non-contributory social assistance programs often miss the working poor, particularly in urban areas. These workers, who are in streets, markets, landfills, and homes, are increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather conditions like heat waves, floods, and fires, which impact their health and their productivity. As climate transition measures reshape industries that they work in, their roles in global value chains will be directly affected, either positively or negatively. A key action for states, therefore, is to improve statistics on informality so that policymakers have a more nuanced understanding of the scope of the informal economy and the diversity of working conditions within it. The second principle is indivisibility. Work-related rights are interrelated and interdependent, and I want to highlight the importance of the rights to freedom of association and to collective bargaining in realizing the rights to work and to social security. These are collective rights which address unequal power relations inherent in working arrangements and working relationships. They enable workers to participate in workplace decision-making and bargain for better working conditions and expanded social security. Workers in the informal economy can and do organize, but they face institutional barriers to registering as unions, such as onerous representativity thresholds or unfeasible administrative requirements. They do register as associations and cooperatives, but in these cases, they are typically excluded from social dialogue institutions, including tripartite structures, which limits their ability to meaningfully participate in policy and lawmaking processes. A key action for states, therefore, is to update labor laws or create new ones that are designed for workplaces like public spaces and private homes, and remove legal barriers to registering worker organizations as unions. The third principle is interconnectedness. States' obligations in realizing the right to work and to social security in the informal economy are multidimensional. They must take action to respect, protect, and fulfill these rights, And by unpacking how these obligations apply specifically to informality, we can chart a clear human rights-based path towards workers' transition to the informal economy. The obligation to respect means that states must avoid actions that interfere with or limit the rights to work and to social security. This includes actions by local authorities. In many cities, workers in public spaces face a myriad of laws, regulations, and ordinances that restrict their activities. Some of these criminalize their work, others are enforced in an arbitrary, discriminatory, or corrupt manner. Social dialogue is critical to changing this. It allows workers to help shape laws that better reflect their realities and ensure that enforcement is fair and respects their right to due process. Some restrictions on informal work may be necessary for public interest, such as closing dump sites, rezoning public space, or limiting access to particular resources for environmental concerns. In these cases, they should be replaced with alternatives that provide at least the same value to workers, and this can be done through livelihood protection plans that are co-designed with workers. The obligation to protect means that states must design regulatory frameworks to hold employers and others accountable for their actions when they violate workers' rights. Workers who are isolated in private homes, such as domestic workers and home workers, are especially vulnerable. They are often overlooked by labour inspections and in factory audits, so strengthening measures to ensure that employers follow labour laws, including mandatory contracts and registration in social insurance schemes, is crucial. Furthermore, states' extraterritorial obligations include preventing corporations from harming workers' rights abroad. This is hugely important for workers who are part of complex global value chains. And the exclusion of home workers from the due diligence requirements currently being debated in Europe is a worrying retrogression in this regard. The obligation to fulfill rights to work and social security in the context of informality is a gradual, multi-step process, as we heard. There is no one-size-fits-all solutions. Governments must adapt their strategies to fit the unique needs of their economies and labour markets. Key to this is co-designing measures that address the specific needs of poor workers in the informal economy and promote long-term systemic change, and investing the maximum available resources in them. Such measures include improving urban infrastructure, expanding social security schemes, and supporting the integration of worker cooperatives into sustainable value chains. Turning to social security, as we've heard, a growing number of countries are adapting contributory social insurance to include informal economy workers, although progress is slow. Rights-aligned actions for states to close the financing gap for social security include mobilizing domestic resources through a progressive tax system that recognizes what workers in the informal economy already pay, often at the municipal level, ensuring that those who benefit from workers' labour contribute to social security, for example, by earmarking revenue from extended producer responsibility schemes, or ensuring digital platforms contribute to contractors' social insurance. Subsidising social insurance contributions for low-income informal economy workers to expand the contributor base for social security schemes, and mobilising international financing through international cooperation and assistance such as the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions. Again, action is urgently needed. Geopolitical upheaval, economic volatility, and climate breakdown will only worsen the challenges facing informal economy workers, but we shouldn't accept that there's no alternative. We can build a human rights economy, one that protects workers, promotes equality, and strengthens resilience for the future. Informal workers must be at the forefront of our efforts. Thank you.